Well, thank you very much for coming. Today, our talk is going to be on automated checker friendliness and how to maximize efficiency in your automated accessibility testing. My name is Jeremy Gonzalez. I'm a senior accessibility analyst at Site Improve.
I'm Dan, accessibility engineer at Site Improve.
And we'll have a couple demo pages. So if anyone's interested in kind of following along with that, we have a QR code up on the screen. I'll leave it up there for just a second.
Over to me. This slide says, how much screen could a screen reader read if a screen reader could read screen? This is my attempt at humor. It's a joke I heard on a deep dive on Monday, and it's been cracking me up ever since. It has nothing to do with anything, but I thought I'd share with y'all. Thank Doug Shepherds for this comedy. All right, your slide, sir.
Hey. So automated checker friendliness. I think this is kind of a term that we're all kind of aware of, either consciously or subconsciously. But Dan and I haven't really seen this defined anywhere. So this is our attempt to actually define the term automated checker friendliness. And ACF refers to how well a website can reliably be tested and flagged against the WCAG success criterion by automated accessibility testing tools without the need for human interpretation.
So this talk comes with several assumptions in order to be useful. Assumption number 0 is that you either make web pages or you advise other people on how to make web pages. This isn't directly useful to, you being a user. You're more of a developer or a consultant or something like that, or someone in charge of an accessibility program. That's assumption number 0. Assumption number 1 is that automated checkers are sometimes useful. Now, a lot of people think automated checkers are overrated, and we certainly don't think that automated accessibility checkers can cover a majority of accessibility problems. We think that's not true. It's somewhere between maybe 50% at the high end and 10% at the low end. So they don't cover everything, but they cover some things. And what they cover really fast and cheaply. So that's an assumption that automated checkers have their place. Assumption number 2 is that passing WCAG is good. Now, there's a lot more to accessibility than just WCAG compliance, and some people take a totally anti-WCAG approach. But we're in a part of the industry that is really WCAG-centric, so that's where we're coming from, WCAG-focused. Assumption number 3 is that you are good, and by good I mean not evil. I put this in here because I assume that everybody in the audience has good intentions. Some of the advice in this talk could be used for evil purposes, where you can game the check or create an overlay that would cheat and pass the check when you should not. I'm assuming nobody here wants to do that sort of thing, but we will accidentally give advice that could be misused in this way. So that's assumption number 3, that you are good. So to frame this whole conversation, our main goal is accuracy of an automated checker. And I distinguish between passing the SC and passing the check. By SC, I mean success criterion. That's the WCAG success criterion. That's the important thing, right, for accessibility, that you pass the SC. And then passing the check is a separate matter. Check means the automated check, and that's just a piece of code that some vendor wrote to check for the corresponding SC. So in a perfect world, it would be really simple. Like I have on this slide, a 2x2 matrix with all the combinations. You can pass the SC and pass the check. You can fail the SC and fail the check. You can pass the SC and fail the check. And you can fail the SC and pass the check. And all these situations that we're going to talk about for the next 85 minutes fit into one of these 4 quadrants. So, for example, passing the SC and passing the check. Before I get to that, I want to frame this by out here is what I call the no checker zone. That's all manual accessibility testing. That's outside the scope of this talk. We're talking about the stuff that can conceivably be checked by an automated checker. So quadrant number 1 in the top right is passing the SC and passing the check. In this quadrant, everything's good. You're good, you have no problems, and your automated checker is accurately reflecting what your site is doing. As an example of that, I have a demo page here, and we're talking about the contrast SC. And here is a button on this demo page, and the button says sign up for this course. The button has black text on a very light gray background, and it passes the contrast SC with flying colors. That's passing the SC, and the automated checker also gives this a pass. Simple. Not much to say about this quadrant. The next one is, just a sec, failing the SC and failing the check. This is not great, but at least your automated checker is giving you accurate information about what you need to fix. And an example of this is like on the demo page here, we have that same button, sign up for this course. It has white text on a blue background, and this is something like 2.5:1 contrast, and it fails the SC, and it fails the check. So still, we're in pretty straightforward territory here. It starts to get more complicated in the next quadrant, which is passing the SC and failing the check. Now, what is this quadrant, this situation? This is the situation where you have noise or you have false positives. This is something where your automated checker is telling you that something is bad, but you go and check it manually and it's actually good. So this is a huge problem for some people, and I deal with it every day. This noise or false positives quadrant. And an example of that is over here somewhere, just a sec. Why can't I go there now? I'm trying to move my mouse to the, oh, I get it. I have to alt, okay, sorry. Passing the SC and failing the check. Here's that sign up for this course button again. It has black text on the same gray background, but it also has a text shadow now. The text shadow is very faint. It doesn't actually make the contrast fail. So you're still passing the SC, you have sufficient contrast, but some tools, including Site Improves, get thrown off by the text shadow. They can't deal with it. Like they can't do that pixel by pixel comparison to actually figure out that this is passing the contrast SC. So you get kicked into the guided review flow, which means you now have to deal with this manually. And that is noise. That's false positives, basically. So this is our first taste of automated checker unfriendliness, right? If you use a text shadow and you're using Site Improve, you're going to have a bad time. The next quadrant. One sec. Oh, I guess the laser doesn't let me click ahead. Okay, so the next quadrant, failing the SC and passing the check. This is what we call bad coverage. So this is where you have a real accessibility problem on the page. You know it's true, or your auditor, your manual auditor told you that it's a real problem. But the automated checker either gave it a pass or said nothing. And saying nothing is the same as a pass. So that has an example on the demo page here. That's something like this. Here's our sign up for this course button again, but this time it's disabled and it's gray and it has bad contrast. And it also has new text. Instead of just saying sign up for this course, it says, sorry, you are missing one or more prerequisites for this course, so you can't sign up for it. If you would like to apply for an exception, email exceptions@school.edu. So it's giving a lot of new and important information in the button, but the button has bad contrast, and we're assuming this text doesn't exist elsewhere on the page, so this is bad. But the SC and all the automated checkers have an exception for disabled buttons. The automated checker will see that the button is disabled and will say, oh, WCAG says contrast rules don't apply to a disabled button. So it'll just give it a pass, even though any human auditor that is any good will give this a fail, either under the contrast SC or something else. They'll say, well, no, you shouldn't be allowed to use this exception to get out of jail in this way. You should give it good contrast because there's essential information here. The automated checker isn't smart enough to know that, so the automated checker gives it a pass. And this is another example of automated checker unfriendliness. If one of your content authors does something like this, you will be, let me switch back to the slide, you will be in this quadrant. You'll be failing the SC, passing the check. That's bad coverage. That's automated checker unfriendliness, example number 2. And there's generally 2 subcategories. It's either honest limitations of the automated checker, or in this quadrant, you also have evil, gaming the system, and overlays. Because there's a lot of ways where if you're really cynical and evil, you could make an overlay to automatically pass like all kinds of automated checks even though your accessibility is in fact quite bad. Like an overlay could run some JavaScript to add alt equals XYZ to every image element. That's going to pass the automated check because the automated check is too simplistic, but you're actually failing the SC. So in this quadrant, we have different kinds of automated checker unfriendliness. In this talk, our goal is basically to improve accuracy with different kinds of ways of building your website. If you do what we think are best practices and avoid all the things that we've seen our customers get into trouble with, there's these ways of building your site that we're going to share that will enable you to avoid these two quadrants, right? So you'll be hopefully moving your situations from this quadrant, like the fail SC pass the check, to fail SC fail the check. And likewise over here, to increase the accuracy of your automated checker is our basic goal here. I am kind of curious, and I'd like to check in with the audience if you have ever seen anything like this before in the wild. Like, have you ever had an example where you knew something was good and your automated checker said it was bad? Or vice versa? Or I see a nod. What do you think?
Yeah, seen that it passes our check.
I guess the mic's coming to you. Thank you.
Yeah, I've seen that the manual checks have passed, but the automated checks are telling us that it's not, and we have to go in and mark that as like an exception, and yeah.
Yep.
It has happened.
Yeah. Which product are you using?
I'm Lisa, so we built the design system.
Nice. Okay. Yeah, that's exactly what we're talking about. And that's like most of the talk is this quadrant, passing the SC and failing the check, I think is what you just described. Huge problem. Out of curiosity, was it contrast problems or
I think it was a screen reader issue.
screen reader issue? Okay. Yeah, so that's that happens. Anyone else with any personal experience or questions about what all this means? Because it's it's not the most obvious thing in the world. Okay. Next up is you, sir.
Dan kind of started touching on some of this, but why we should build an automated checker friendly site. Like Dan said, typically only 20 to 40% of WCAG criteria can be checked automatically. And that will really depend on how much of your site the automated checker can understand. So our goal is to make sure that when we're building our sites, we're increasing our coverage, right? So that we're on the upper end of that range. We also want to, our other goal is to make sure we're reducing the amount of noise that's getting returned to us from the automated checkers. And this is that, pass the SC, but fail the check, or false positives is how it's referred to sometimes. This results in a lot of busy work. We have to now spend our time going through and validating the machine, right? And determining whether these results that we got back are actual issues or not. So what we want to do is we want to make sure we're spending our time and our energy and our effort on the other 60 to 80% of those checks that aren't covered by the automated checker, because that's where we're going to have the most bang for our buck and make sure our sites are useful for our users. We also want to reduce some legal risks, whether they're artificial or not. I used to work in higher education. Our website got hit with an OCR complaint. And when we started digging in through those results, it became apparent very quickly that someone just ran an automated check on our site, and it actually returned a bunch of false positives that were then put into the complaint. But once a complaint or a lawsuit is filed, it's very difficult to then kind of prove your compliance, because there were other barriers that did exist on our site that weren't actually called out in the OCR complaint. But once that process starts rolling and you have someone from the Office of Civil Rights, DOJ, a law firm, what have you, actually looking at the site, now they're starting to find all kinds of other things. So the more we can reduce those false positives that are showing up in those automated checks, the better we are, kind of moving forward. We're not putting up a red flag and saying, hey, look at us over here. Real briefly, I do want to just touch on some of the differences between automated and manual testing. I do work on the manual testing team, so this is kind of my day job. One isn't better, or sorry, manual testing or automated testing, like one doesn't have more, one isn't better than the other. A comprehensive accessibility plan includes both. Some of the benefits of manual testing is that we're very thorough. As a manual auditor, we go through and touch every single element on a page multiple times. Using different screen readers, keyboard only navigation testing, and then we do adaptability testing and all kinds of other tools and stuff that we go through. It's also human performance testing. So we go to a site and we can interact with it just like a normal user would, rather than like a machine. You don't have to program any parameters to go through and activate modals or workflows or anything like that. We can interact with it just like a user would. We're also performing all this testing on real devices. So even the mobile testing, we have physical mobile devices that we'll load your site on and test that way. So using any type of emulation or headless browsers. But the limitations of manual testing is that it's really slow. It's not unusual for us to spend 6 to 8 hours on a page, going through all the different assistive technologies and again, touching every single element on that page. And it relies on representative sampling. So we take a subset of pages of your site, go through, manually test them, and then we're expecting our customers to then take those results and apply all those fixes to the rest of their site. I always say that those results don't live in a vacuum. So how that compares to automated testing. Automated testing can, I always say that it's great at scanning the breadth of your site, where manual testing is great at scanning the depth of your site. Meaning that we can scan a large number of pages very quickly. We can set that up on a recurring crawl. And as new content gets added, we can just automatically start scanning all that new content as well. I think it's also important to point out that it can be run by anyone. You don't have to be an expert in WCAG to run an automated check. A lot of times the results that will get returned to you from whatever product you're using will also be accompanied with guidance and support to help you fix those issues. The limitations, as we started talking about of the automated tools, is the failure to detect like textual information, nuanced, things that are like hidden. It requires like dynamic content updating. It can incorrectly flag compliant elements, and then once again miss violations completely. In my humble opinion, areas where automated tools will struggle and probably always will are things like descriptive alt text. Even with AI, or maybe I should say especially with AI, the auto-generated alt text is very literal. It describes exactly what's happening in the image. I mean, it may not include some of the information that's we might write as a human to if that image is evoking some type of emotion or if it's a functional image or something like that. I should say too, I want to include an example here. One of our analysts who's no longer with us, she was testing a fast food website, and they had some type of dipping sauce, and they had an overlay generating this descriptive alt text for them. And when she came to the dipping sauce, the alt text for that dipping sauce came back as wishbone chunky orange juice, which does not sound very appetizing. Some other areas where automated testing is going to struggle is with focus order. It can take its best guess, especially with AI, it is getting better. But we see this every single day where developers are going through and they're readjusting the focus order using tab index, right? So we know that developers are going out there and they want users to follow a specific order. And a computer's not gonna be able to understand that or determine whether that is a logical focus order or not. Color contrast. It's great if it's just, text on top of a plain background. But once you start adding things, like I have an example pretty soon here of some CSS properties for background. And once you start adding in something like opacity or images, overlays, something like that, the automated checkers really struggle determining what the color contrast is. And the last couple things, adaptive content. So again, this is things that are hidden behind, that require some type of user interaction to, activate and then display. And then custom components, whether the automated tester can understand what those are being used for. I think we should also talk about some rule assumptions. So there's ACT rule assumptions, which ACT rules are a set of standardized accessibility testing rules to kind of promote consistency and reliability in automated testing across the different rules and vendors. Basically, they define how to test web content in a precise and consistent and machine testable way. In most ACT rules, there's something called an assumption. See if I can pull it up.
Yeah. It's alpha rules. That'll show assumptions though.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is set improves alpha rules, but it follows the ACT rule set for the Texas minimum contrast. And if we kind of scroll down here, we have applicability, exceptions, and then here's the assumptions. So the assumptions imply that the content being tested has met a certain condition that allows the rule to be valid. So for this Texas minimum contrast rule, we see that there's an assumption here that text nodes are not used for logo types. So we know in the rules that logos and logo types have an exception for contrast, right? So that's where these assumptions are kind of sorry, what am I trying to say here? The text nodes are sorry, what?
Well, that's the that's the deal. That's the contract is the way I look at it. The assumptions are things where if you break this deal, you will get noise. And this is the only documented example I know of where this is actually written down. Like this is the automated checker friendliness right here. That's the way I see it.
Great, thank you. And then if you want some proof of cross-vendor support, if we take a look at Rule 17. So down here in the acknowledgements, here we're saying that we're looking at this rule, the 6CFA 84. And then if we go to the Q's list of rules.
I don't know if you can control F for. Oh, you found it.
Right
Okay,
here.
cool.
Yep. So on the alpha rule, I actually mentioned this on alpha rule that we just looked at. It was for the hidden already hidden focus. And then right here again, we see that it's pointing to that same rule. So multiple vendors are using the ACT rules to kind of evaluate or code their automated checkers to evaluate these rules.
Large stuff.
Oh, yeah. And then, like Dan said, the assumptions are kind of documented limitations of those automated checkers. And if you do some of these things, you are going to generate a lot of noise and false positives.
All right. Yeah, just to talk a little more about assumptions, because they're one of my favorite topics. The assumptions section should probably be called the automated checker friendliness section, in my opinion, because it's just a treasure trove of all these things you need to do in order to get good results from your automated checker, but they don't really tell you that, especially DQ obscures that, in my opinion. I don't mean to talk badly about DQ, but I want to show what they do and don't do, because like for this particular rule, what was it, like 6CF or something? 6CF. Nice. There will be a quiz later and you will win it, sir.
Didn't focus. Arya didn't focus.
6CF. Why am I failing to find six? Okay, there it is. Yeah. Rule, it's pretty obscure. Rule ID 6CF-A84. That's what the DQ axe rule is mapping to, right? The ACT rule 6CF-A84. We go here and we see assumptions, and that's the contract, right? DQ doesn't do this in their actual rule pages. Like, so here I'm clicking on the rule, RE hidden focus of DQ. The word assumption appears nowhere here. They hid it. So it doesn't appear on the page for the axe rule. It only appears on the page of the list of axe rules. So I think they kind of buried it, and that's not great. But the point is that, well, I think SiteImprove did this particular thing a little better, and they put the source rule and the assumptions right on our page. But it amounts to the same thing. This is the deal, right? This is the stuff you need to do in order to have the automated check be accurate. And the goal, of course, there is that automated checking is so cheap and fast, it makes logical sense that you want to do as much stuff in the automated space before moving to the manual space. That's my 2 cents on rule assumptions. It brings us to concrete advice. Fading out is a design technique that is used in all kinds of ways. And most of the time, it's not very automated checker friendly. On this slide, we have what some people call a text toggle or an expandable text toggle. This screenshot is from monday.com, and it has a paragraph of text, and then the last 3 lines or so are fading out. And then you have a button that says see more. You know, every website you use has something like this. YouTube, LinkedIn, everything. This example I see on customer sites a lot, and it has bad automated checker friendliness, because even though a manual auditor would most likely have no problem with this text fading out because they know that it's not crucial and you can get to it from the see more button, manual auditor would pass it. Automated checker will fail it because the automated checker is not smart enough to know that this is bad contrast only because there's a see more button. Like, you can picture, maybe in the future there will be a way to tell the automated checker that. It doesn't exist yet. So you're going to get noise. So I would recommend, if you want your automated checker to not give you noise, you push back on the design decision to fade out. A lot of people are attached to fade out, but you don't have to be. If you just don't fade out, you're in really good company. Here's a screenshot of LinkedIn. They don't fade out. This is a post I made a few weeks ago, and it just has my paragraph of text, my post, and it cuts off hard. No fade out, just a more button. This is automated checker friendly.
Passing color contrast.
More passing color contrast. Tell me more. Oh, the button. I could test it if we wanted to do that. Let's assume that you could make it pass, right? So fair question. Yeah, I'm tempted to bring out the eyedropper tool and everything like that, but yeah, good question. That brings us to, okay, other examples of fading out. Carousels. On this slide is what I call a multi-item carousel. It's the kind of carousel that shows 2.5 items at the same time. And you have a next button and a previous button, or like a slide right button and a slide left button. We see this pretty often. People are failing the automated checker for contrast again, because the automated checker sees bad contrast over here where it's faded out. Manual auditor would probably have no problem with that because they know that they can scroll to the right, but you have bad automated checker friendliness because of this design decision to fade things out. You don't have to. Here's the example that is good. You just don't fade out. You just cut off the card in the middle of the card. This is really popular, and it's kind of it's enforced. Like I was testing Netflix. They have sliders a lot like this, and they always cut it off at about like 0.3 of a slide. And I zoomed in and out, and I resized the viewport all kinds of ways. I could not get Netflix to cut off their carousel in like cleanly between slides, right? It was always cutting a slide at like 0.3 across the slide, which is awesome. That means that the user always has a hint. Oh, there's more stuff, right? Like that's the signifier of more stuff. That's what the other, like the fade out example was trying to get across. But you can get across that idea that there's more stuff to the right just as well with cutting it off hard, and you're in good company, such as Netflix. That's the automated checker friendly way. I'm going to skip that one. So very similar to fading out is fading in. There's a bunch of design decisions where people fade content in, and they are not automated checker friendly. Fading on scroll. So this is, again, a pretty contrast SC focused for now. I see a lot of pages where they designed it so that the content fades in as the user scrolls down the viewport. I guess they like the idea of animation or some kind of pizzazz, and that's okay. This whole talk is saying you can definitely do whatever you want, but if you do certain things, you will be reducing the accuracy of your automated checker and therefore increasing the cost of your accessibility program, right? So that's the trade-off that we're making. Obviously, I'm in favor of automated checkers and accessibility, but if you have a program testing everything manually accurately, then go for it. If you don't, then avoid fading in on scroll because the automated checkers in general, they only check the page in the state that it's in, which means you have a page that has a viewport and the page is say 10 screenfuls long, but you're only looking at one screenful right now. And that means the content down below is faded out, like it has bad contrast now. And the automated checker is not smart enough to know that. There's ways to hack around this, but they're not great. Better, I think, if you want an efficient accessibility program, just push back on the design decision to fade things in on scroll. Also, fading in things on page load. So this is more of a crawler only problem. And crawlers are something we haven't talked about yet, but I think you know what they are. Most automated checkers have two versions. There's the browser extension version and there's the crawler version. Browser extension is when you install like the SiteImprove browser extension or the Axe DevTools browser extension. Then you get to click check and it checks your whatever page you have in your current tab. Those are great and they're usually free. All these companies also have the crawler version where they do the same thing, but they crawled your site with their own bot or spider or whatever, so that you can get thousands of pages checked automatically and you get them in a kind of a dashboard of results, and that's cool. And that's always a paid version for this crawler thing. So Axe has their crawler version. I think it's called Axe Monitor. SiteImprove has ours. Many people have theirs. Like Pope Tech based on Wave, I think. A lot of variety in the industry. But I think that they all probably have similar problems to what we see every day, where if a page fades in on page load, then it's going to be failing contrast all the time because the crawler will just load, like in the background on the server somewhere. The crawler is loading the page in a virtual browser or whatever. It's loading the page, and then it might wait a second. It might wait 2 seconds. It's probably not going to wait 10 seconds, for the whole content to fade in. So it grabs the snapshot of the page before it's finished fading in, and then it's going to fail it for contrast because the automated checker has no way of knowing that it should have waited longer. The manual auditor would have just seen this happening and waited. So that's an argument in favor of pushing back on the design decision to do this. There are hacks and workarounds to make it work, but it's time consuming for everyone. There's that screen reader joke again. Over to you.
So like Yeah, I was saying too, we see a lot of design decisions, and some of them good and some of them bad, every single day. I want to talk real briefly about some design traps, that we see. I think somewhere along the way, marketing departments convinced everyone that we need to do something unique to stand out. When I was a developer previously, I was always being asked to, how can we do this? How can we create something flashy? And I got kind of tired of that, which is why I came to accessibility. But everyone's always trying to, do this thing where they're making they want to make their content stand out. This desire is particularly bad for ACF and accessibility in general. That generally leads to a lot of unpredictability for users, and in that sense, also the automated checker, because people are going to be coding things using custom components and not adding the required accessibility to them. I argue that we should favor predictability over individuality, at least on the site level. And there's a lot of sites that have standardized layouts, but that still allow their content contributors to be creative. Things like YouTube, Etsy, eBay. I mean, these are all big names, right? They have a standard site layout, but their content contributors are allowed to kind of do whatever they want, as long as it fits the platform. It also provides a lot of predictability for users because they can go to, let's take YouTube for an example. They can go to any channel, be able to interact with that player, use the comment section, and that kind of thing. Do they still have accessibility issues? Absolutely. But, as if you think of your own site, when a crawler comes to it, if you can understand more of that content, again, we're increasing that coverage. One of our customers recently had a set of bullets on their site, and they wanted some custom bullet icon. And so the way that they did it is they added the CSS property of background, and then put a URL, a link to an image that was supposed to load in. What ended up happening is the automated checker went to their site, took a look at their bulleted items, and said, I can't understand this. And the reason was because of the background image. Again, I think I kind of mentioned this before, but when you start adding things like using the CSS property for backgrounds, there's not a way to apply a accessible name to that image or an alternative text. Not that these bullets would need them, but I've seen other pages use the same example and the same issue. The automated checker just doesn't understand when there's a background image, even though it's completely valid HTML, right, and CSS. Same thing with opacity. When you set an opacity on a color or on a background color, the automated checker has a really hard time understanding it. So there's other ways to kind of get custom bullets, and that's what this customer, what we recommended this customer. But yeah, even I guess I just want to say, like, even if you are using valid HTML and CSS and JS, you could be creating automated checker unfriendly sites. Another example is custom focus outlines. We always recommend to our customers to just use the default browser agent, but this is another area where someone decided they don't like the default look of those custom focus outlines. And so here's just kind of on the slide is a list of links showing a bunch of different types of links. And they made it kind of this dark blue color. It's really visible around, the standard text links. But once we get down to this button style link, when that receives focus, it's the same color as, this custom focus outline that they did here. Because it's a button style link, it has padding in it, and then that focus outline is actually right up against that button style. the automated checker would actually pass this because those links do have a focus outline. It, meets the contrast against the background. As a manual auditor, I would fail it because, again, that once that focus outline goes around this button, it's gonna be right up against it and we're not gonna be able to see it. There is an easy fix. That's just adding an outline offset, and then now, that focus outline, we can still have that dark blue outline, but it's set apart a little bit from that focus button. The automated checker, again, doesn't understand that. It doesn't, it can't look at a button like this and determine, whether, it needs that offset. So, just want to kind of reiterate that automated checkers are a little bit more simplistic in the way that they're looking at things. They would pass this because it has, a highly visible focus outline, even though in reality, we know that it doesn't.
Okay. Next topic is, when is the DOM built? This is a big topic, and it's probably the longest slide I've ever made in my life, but it's a huge topic for automated checker friendliness, and it explains support tickets I see every day and countless hours spent on our customer side and our side battling with bad automated checker friendliness. So I thought I would document it. When is the DOM built is the question. I'm talking about the DOM as in the HTML. I'm talking about that DOM that is on page load, right? So you could have an interactive page, build stuff in the DOM after the user does stuff. We're not talking about that here. We're just talking about, when the page loads, and in the web in 2025, half the time there is like there's a bunch of stuff that lazy loads or is running on JavaScript doing an API call, and you can watch the page appear before your eyes one piece at a time. So that's the DOM building process that I'm talking about on page load. And I'm not going to talk about the entire DOM. I'm going to narrow down to like each element because, when an automated checker fails something, it fails an element, most of the time. So it's specific about when is that element built, when does that element have its attributes set and whatnot. This is a problem for crawler-based automated checkers because they need to decide when the page is finished loading. So this is a real mess in the industry because nobody agrees on when the page is finished loading. There's no standard technique to decide in a piece of code when the page is finished loading. A manual auditor like Jeremy will just be looking at the page, and they will give it plenty of time probably, and they will just say, okay, has it stopped moving? Wait a few more seconds. Okay, it's finished loading. Now I can start doing things. The crawler-based automated checker is running on a server somewhere. It doesn't want to wait around. It doesn't have time. It has 100,000 pages to check today. So they all are in a hurry, and they might wait 5 seconds. They're probably not going to wait 10. They have various heuristics to tell when the page is finished loading. If there's anybody that's worked with Puppeteer, like our crawler uses like network idle 0 and network idle 1. That's an obscure topic. But the point is, there's no standard way of knowing when the page is finished loading, in an automated way. So this is where when is the DOM built is a really important topic. There's 3 basic points in time when the DOM could be built. Not on the slide yet, but they are basically in the source HTML, on some on-page load JavaScript, and on user interaction. So that's like the 3 rough zones of the question here. First up, in the source HTML, this is the best for automated checker friendliness. Source HTML means that HTML that you see if you do a view source, and it's also it's basically what the server sends to the browser, right? That's the source HTML. If you do everything in the source HTML, you will have awesome automated checker friendliness, at least on the crawler page load question. But the modern web is not built that way for some reason. A lot of things are done on JavaScript after the page loads, and that's where we start to get into trouble. More recent advances are things like React server components, and this implements something called server-side rendering. There's a pretty good MDN article on server-side rendering, and that's the modern way to do it. The old school way was with PHP. It's been around for 30 years. PHP is by default the way to do server-side rendering all the time. You know, the code runs on the server, does all the database calls, builds the DOM, and then sends it to the browser, right? So this is obviously pretty techy on like in terms of how to build your pages, but somebody makes these decisions, and they have different degrees of automated checker friendliness. Next up, second best is on-page load JavaScript. That is when you can, sometimes you will have good automated checker friendliness if you build your DOM in this way. Sometimes you won't. So there's two basic ways. If your JavaScript is synchronous and very fast, you will be fine. If your JavaScript is asynchronous and or slow, then you'll start to have trouble. And that's when the crawler will fail to notice when your page has not finished loading yet. It'll run the automated checks too soon, and you will get noise or bad coverage. You know, there's countless examples in my company. I just don't have a lot of experience with other companies' crawler-based products because they're all paid. But I was thinking of someone I met at Access U last year, and she said that her company tried Axe Monitor, which is their crawler product, and they gave up because it kept doing things like the crawler-based version would show them 4 errors on a page. And then when they manually checked it with Axe DevTools, the browser extension, they would get 10 errors. So 4 versus 10. Why was the crawler-based version missing so much? The answer is in here somewhere. Something about the way they built their page was not automated checker friendly. The general idea here is that if you add a lot of stuff, like several seconds after the page started loading, you're going to have a bad time, especially if it's stuff that is important for the accessibility checks to work. I noticed Carl Groves made a LinkedIn post a few weeks ago, and he touched on this topic, although I don't think he realized. He was complaining about a customer that was adding alt attributes with JavaScript several seconds into the page load process. The alt attributes, there was a few problems with that way of doing things. But one problem was that it had very bad automated checker friendliness, because if the automated checker gets run before that, then it'll see there's no alt attribute, then you'll fail the automated alt attribute check, right? So it's better to add your alt attributes earlier, which basically means in the source HTML. Yes? That's a fine question. I honestly don't know the answer. Yeah, Carl Grove's example was the question was, why would you add alt attributes in JavaScript? I know it seems crazy to you and me. They said it was from an API call that got some JSON and that had the alt text. I'd say it was easier for somebody. but people get pushed into these decisions for crazy reasons, and then they have a mess on their hands. And that's this. Yeah. Yeah, any other questions or comments? I always say if you're thinking of a question, there's a good chance that someone else is thinking of the same question. So why hesitate? Feel free to raise a hand anytime. How's the chat, by the way, to our room monitor?
No.
All silent on the chat. So Carl Groves noticed this, or at least I'm twisting his LinkedIn post into my talk of automated checker friendliness. Something I see in my company all the time is page loads, and it has this sidebar that has like upcoming events, and there's like 3 or 5 upcoming events, right? And that panel there, like that div with all the upcoming events, was populated with an API call. And it was one of those DOM building API calls, right? Like the on page load, an API call got made from the browser, some DOM got built, and then it updated the page. Now that's okay, but these customers keep having a bad time because our crawler grabbed the page, did the checks before that API call and DOM building had finished. That's the basic situation. If you can at all avoid that, if you can do any of it on page load, in the source HTML, server-side rendering techniques, you will have a much better time. Let's see. I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit. Okay, so the third zone on this timeline is on user interaction. This is the last time you can build the DOM, and it's also the worst time you can build the DOM for automated checker friendliness. This would be like you do something crazy, like if the user scrolls down, then you add the alt attribute. It's weird, but people do things like this. So Yeah, first category of user interaction. One possible user interaction is the user scrolls down. For example, lazy loading. Lazy loading is that technique where you load the page, but it doesn't really load all of it. The bottom half of it, like, below where you can see in your viewport, is going to be not loaded yet, but only when the user scrolls down in their viewport does the stuff get loaded, hopefully before they actually want to see it. So when lazy loading is working, you won't notice, except you will have less network traffic, basically, if you're checking that sort of thing. Lazy loading is extremely popular, and there's many ways to do it, and some of them are automated checker friendly, and some ways are not. One way is to use image loading equals lazy attribute. There's no automated checker friendliness problem there. But the iframe element also has a loading equals lazy attribute, and there are automated checker problems with that, because then the whole iframe content won't be loaded yet unless you actually scroll down. So your crawler isn't going to see all that stuff. So you will either get, you'll just be missing it, you'll just be blank and having bad coverage. And I'm also noticing an echo on this. Did you notice that before? It's very faint. I wonder if I can turn that down. Okay, I wonder if it could be the external monitor also. Okay, I'll power through. Lazy loading. It's a problem. And you have to basically analyze, you have to ask yourself the question, if you're implementing lazy loading, would you be okay with the automated checks being run before your lazy stuff is lazy loaded? If your answer is no, then you have an automated checker friendliness problem. If your answer is yes, it's just some optional stuff you don't care about, then you have no problem. Another technique, getting into a pretty advanced territory, is called windowing, also known as virtualization. This is a bit like lazy loading on steroids, where the lazy loading happens. It's like lazy loading, but then if the user scrolls past that part of the page in the viewport, then it will get unloaded by some clever JavaScript. This is how infinite scroll is implemented, because you can't just load all of Reddit forever, right? The DOM is going to get too big, your browser is going to crash. It's a memory problem. So people, or like a really long table, like 10,000 rows table, people implement windowing. So they only load like the 10 or 20 rows that the user can actually see at any moment. This is cool and very clever. Sometimes it has some automated checker friendliness risks, because some people, like a certain customer of ours, they don't just load table rows with windowing. They load things like headings. So these headings are really important to our automated accessibility checks. So the crawler version just saw this really limited version of the page with a little window here, and the headings didn't exist, and the heading checks all failed. It was chaos, and it still is. That fire is still burning. Because that particular customer built their pages in such a zany way. So I would say if you're doing windowing, think again about, would you be okay if the automated accessibility checks were being run in any state of this windowing cleverness? So there's a lot I could do to flesh out this whole thing. Scroll triggered animation is the last one I want to cover. This is when you have a design decision similar to the fading in that I was talking about earlier, but this is even more aggressive. It's like the user scrolls down and some content flies in from the side. Or another one is spinners, like a spinning number. You scroll down and something appears and it says, we have had 169 days without a workplace injury, and you see the number spin up. Really common thing. And, I don't want to argue with that. Maybe it's more engaging. I like spinning numbers too. But the automated checker friendliness is terrible because the crawler is going to grab a snapshot of that either usually before all that stuff has happened. There are ways around this. The site improves specific ways. You always need a support ticket. You don't have access to these obscure options as a user. Support will help you, but you've probably already spent a bunch of time, when you get into this situation. So I guess the overall theme of this talk is that if you ever find yourself in a position of if you notice bad automated checker results, and if you know that it's due to a certain design decision, you can say that this was discussed by Site Improve at this talk. This is a case of not being automated checker friendly. And that's why we're getting these results. And it's because of this design decision. It's like, I want to give you ammunition, you know, for any pushback you want to do. That's the hope. And I also want to give myself ammunition for the pushback that I want to do, because this kind of thing hasn't been documented in one central place that I know of. So to wrap up this slide, this question of when is the norm built, it's a really techie topic, but most of these risky things can be done well, but it's difficult. It's either difficult to build the page that way, or it's difficult to set up your crawler that way to make it work. So if the question is, when is the DOM built? The answer is the sooner, the better. Over to you.
All right. If we haven't convinced you yet on why you should build your site to be automated checker friendly, maybe this. Automated checker friendliness and SEO go hand in hand. SEO, or search engine optimization, is basically how your pages are ranked and found by search engines. There's a lot of different metrics that go into evaluating those rankings. But if you build your site with automated checker friendliness in mind, search engines are basically like giant screen readers. The specific algorithms for the search engines aren't publicized, but we can take some educated guesses on what they're doing, also based on the documentation that they do put out. So when search engine or search crawlers go out to analyze the page, they interpret the structure and hierarchy on that page. And they reward sites for having good user experiences, often done through the core web vitals and there we go. Core web vitals, the EEAT, which is the experience, expertise, authoritativeness, and trustworthiness framework. And they also do mobile first indexing, which I'll cover here in just a second. So optimizing your site for crawlers, both accessibility crawlers and SEO. The first thing we should be doing is making sure we're using semantic HTML to kind of structure this content. This means using the appropriate landmarks, appropriate headings, heading levels. That way, those crawlers can go through, analyze that page, put it in the appropriate hierarchy, and understand what your page is about. Give a couple just to make the time. And we also want to make sure we're focusing on the user experience. Again, using kind of that semantic HTML to, when we code things, that way, not only do screen reader users know how to go through and interact with that page, but it provides predictability again for the different crawlers. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is performance. So writing clean and well-structured code. As Dan demonstrated in one of his previous slides, the increased page loading speed is always going to be good for search engines and your rankings. They prioritize pages that do have good page load speed. That means not loading any unnecessary code. When you don't use the semantic HTML elements, you're then required to define them and generate all that, which requires extra code to be loaded and increases your page load speed. There's also the responsiveness. So if you remember from a few slides back, I talked about mobile first indexing. So Google prioritizes the mobile version of your website when it comes to the crawling and indexing. But that differs a little bit from automated accessibility checkers. Typically, our crawlers are set up to scan the desktop versions of those sites. So what that means kind of when we're talking about optimizing automated checker friendliness and SEO is we want to limit the amount of changes from the mobile version to the desktop version. So typically things like our navigation, we might change to in the mobile responsive layout. Maybe the footer we change on the mobile responsive layout, but the primary content should be responsive and remain available. Make sure we're not hiding things from users or the crawlers when it goes into that responsive layout. And that kind of goes back to the performance aspect too. If we're limiting the amount that, or the amount of code differences between the desktop version and the mobile version, then it's less code that we have to then push towards the browser and the users and pushing that out as the page loads. We talked briefly about structuring our content. So recently I had a customer who they had a web page. It had no main landmark. I think it had like a nav region header and like a footer. But then the rest of their content was just kind of thrown on the page in divs and spans. So there wasn't any hierarchy or structure to this page that the automated checkers could determine. And so we flagged it for accessibility for the rule of text not in a landmark region. So then the customer, what they went out and did is they did some research and figured out they could use role equals region. So they started applying role equals region to all these individual divs and spans, which then does pass the automated checker. It silenced all the noise that they were getting. But the role equals region, as we know, is just a generic region, right? It would have been a lot better if they added a main landmark to their page, maybe an aside or what have you. So always really important when you're optimizing your pages to make sure that you're using the appropriate landmarks, making sure that the root level and they're not nested and that kind of thing. That way you can provide the crawlers the necessary information that they need to help rank your pages and for accessibility for users. Which then brings us to the importance of semantic markup. I think probably most of us in this room understand again the importance of semantic markup. But sometimes, based on design decisions and maybe time when we need to develop something, we might be forced into do something else. But I'm trying to make my case for always using the semantic markup whenever possible. It has built-in accessibility port that you get for free. It's lightweight, cross-browser friendly. Again, can help with SEO because it lets the crawlers know what content is supposed to be in there, how it's supposed to behave. And yeah, sorry about that. Next, I want to talk about using ARIA responsibly. So there's a couple of misconceptions of ARIA. And just, I think the big one is that you can fix any bad HTML with ARIA. And the first rule of ARIA is not to use ARIA, right? We want to make sure that we're using the semantic HTML, avoid having things like divs and spans coded as buttons and links and that kind of thing. Sometimes ARIA is required, especially for things like dynamic content and letting users know the state of those properties. If you do end up using ARIA on a non-semantic element, it can help checkers interpret the intent that you're trying to do. If you code a div as a button, the checkers will may understand that it's supposed to be some type of user interactive element. But the automated checkers typically can't determine whether that button is actually functional or not, right? Yep. So it's going to flag improper ARIA use, but typically not validate that behavior. And it can also overcomplicate or just mislead users or the checkers as if you apply too many ARIA properties and misuse them. All right, so if you do end up coding something custom. So this again, kind of that example of using divs or spans as buttons. You as a developer now are responsible for providing that element an accessible name, associating the proper roles, placing that element into the focus order, and then adding any keyboard support for that element. But there's also another way to extend HTML, and that's through custom web components. So you can set up and define a custom component. We see this a lot with things like Salesforce, where it's not on server-side rendering. It actually gets pushed out to the browser in the HTML, and it has things, you'll see something like lightning button or something like that. And so the crawlers, when they reach that element, they're like, well, I don't know what that is. And so what we found is a lot of times it will just ignore whole sections of a page because it doesn't understand what the element is, how to check for it or interpret it. So as much as possible, either do the server-side rendering so that when the code that gets pushed out to the browser is just HTML, or use that semantic markup. And that brings me to one of my favorite movies, which is Jurassic Park. And I think this almost every single day when I go out and audit a site. It's Ian Malcolm, and they're watching one of the eggs hatch in the lab, and Ian Malcolm gives John Hammond an ethics talk, and he tells him, "Your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could, they didn't stop to think if they should." I see that every single day. All kinds of just really wild things that are out there. Again, trying to make the flashy things and not really thinking about the user impact.
Got about 20 minutes left. I want to talk about WCAG exceptions and conforming alternate versions. WCAG exceptions are these things that a lot of success criteria have. Like I mentioned one earlier, the contrast SC and having like an exception for disabled components. Another big one is the target size minimum success criterion, which is new in 2.2. So I improved checks for it. So I see problems here all the time. It has a couple of exceptions for like, I'll get into that in a minute. The point is there's these exceptions documented in WCAG, and the automated checkers often struggle to recognize them. So just because an exception exists doesn't mean you should use it in terms of your automated checker friendliness. I have a demo page here, which I will share. Just a sec. Not that one, not that one. Okay, on this page, we have a carousel. Now it has a right button and a left button, and then along the bottom, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 10 buttons to jump to the page. This is going to be too crowded, like these buttons are too small and too crowded for the target size minimum success criterion, so they're going to fail the automated checker. But they will pass the SC because the SC has the exception that says if there's equivalent functionality elsewhere on the page, then these buttons don't need to be that big. The equivalent functionality is the right button and the left button, right? So you would pass the human audit, you will fail the automated check. This is bad automated checker friendliness. So my advice to these people would be, don't use that exception. Don't rely on that because you're not going to have your automated checker recognize that, and you're going to have a bunch of noise to deal with. So here's the pushback. You can either space out these buttons or eliminate them or something like that if you want accurate automated checker results. That's pretty much your only option at this point in history. Similarly, with the target size SC, it has this inline exception, which says that the links don't need to be, or links or buttons or whatever, if they're in a paragraph, roughly speaking, they're in line with anything, they can be too close and that gets a pass. Now, that's sensible and okay. And in this paragraph, like the Automated checker, at least ours, is pretty good at recognizing this and accepting them appropriately. But then there's a lot of corner cases which both our automated checker and WCAG itself are really bad at recognizing. Mostly bulleted lists and numbered lists and lists with, like on this slide, we have, there's a link in a bullet that says there's a link 1, and then there's just some text that is not a link. All these combinations of things. The details aren't so important, except for the fact that WCAG themselves have not agreed on whether these should pass or fail yet. There's open issues about this that have been open for like a couple of years. I've commented on them and said, hey guys, what's going on? But it's just a gray area currently for both WCAG and the automated checkers. So that's my argument for pushing back and saying, instead of bickering and arguing over whether these things should pass because they're too close, why not just space them out a little? I have a demo here, which is like real size. I'll have to zoom into it. But here is a bad example where the line, it's a bulleted list with 3 items. Line height is normal. And there's like 3 items, 3 links, 1, 2, 3. It's going to fail the automated checker. Or at least it fails our automated checker. And I think, I can't remember which other vendors have it yet, but I'm sure they will soon because it's in WCAG 2.2. The good example is shown next, and it's the same bulleted list with a line height of 1.5. And is that really so bad? It's not spaced out to a point that would ruin anyone's design, I hope. There's just some space between the links, and then you get out of the ambiguous cases here according to both WCAG and the automated checker, and you're good. So this is the automated checker friendly way of doing target size minimum. Another one that I've mentioned before is the contrast SC's exception for disabled user interface components. I had that button earlier. On this slide is a paragraph. It says there is a disabled link at the end of this line, so it meets the exception of the contrast SC. Fine. And then sign up. Sign up is a link. Sign up is gray. It has insufficient contrast. Sign up is also disabled. Links are weird though. They don't have a disabled attribute, so the automated checker doesn't know it's disabled. It probably has like a JavaScript void href or something like this. So it's effectively disabled. The manual auditor would know it's disabled. The automated checker doesn't know it. The fix here is ARIA. Sorry. The fix here is to add ARIA disabled equals true. That's a signal to both assistive technology and the automated checker that this link is disabled, and then you will get it appropriately passed. Next example is this, contrast SC again. This time there's an exception for non-text content. The SC doesn't use those exact words, but if you click through the contrast text SC is about text. You click on the definition of text, you'll see that text means expressing something in human language. So all the automated checkers have tried to automate this by, here's a table of contents. We have table of contents, chapter 1, ... 2, chapter 2, ... 21, as in page 21, and so on and so forth. The automated checkers, I tested both SiteImprove and Axe on this one. They tried to recognize that these dots are non-text content, not expressing something in human language, but they failed. They will give the dots with no spaces between them a pass, and they will give the dots with spaces between them a fail. So the point is that the automated checkers are not that smart. They don't have the human judgment, and they have their heuristics that are just spotty. So I think it would be better, or it is clearly more efficient for your accessibility program and its automated testing to just not do that. Give these ... dots some good contrast, and you'll avoid all the hassles. Next up, conforming alternate versions. This is some language in WCAG that basically enables overlays, the widget style overlays where there's like an accessible mode and it has better contrast and big buttons and stuff like that. These are oddly allowed, at least that version of an overlay that does that perfectly is allowed, because if you can get to, like the whole definition is on this slide here, but basically a conforming alternate version is another version that is accessible, right? You got your inaccessible page, that fails. That's okay though, according to WCAG. That's okay if you can reach the accessible version of the page via, accessible mechanisms, like a contrast that has big target size and good contrast and stuff like that, or a button rather. That's obviously like a logistical nightmare to maintain two versions, but it is allowed. And I see a steady stream of our customers complaining about our automated checker results because we didn't check the accessible mode, right? The crawler went out, grabbed every page on their site, and it was the bad contrast version, right? And they said, wait, we have the widget for that. So they dispute the findings, and we say, I'm sorry, you asked us to crawl your site, and your site in its default state exists in the bad contrast mode, the small buttons mode. So we're failing all this stuff. If you want to configure your site so that the accessible mode is the default, then our crawler will find what you want it to find. But currently, we can't do it. So crawler-based automated checkers can't handle conforming alternate versions. They are not that smart. Skipping accordions, etc. Last one. Yeah, I just have a list of concrete examples for the label and name success criterion. This is a favorite of mine, and it's a pretty weird success criterion, in my opinion. I used to think it was straightforward, but I don't think that anymore. I have a test page here, and I'll talk about these. There's like 8 examples on this test page of bad, and they're all bad automated checker friendliness. Label and name is that success criterion that says the visible label of, say, a link has to be contained in the accessible name. This is primarily aimed at voice access AT users, but it also has a lot of benefits for sighted screen reader users or a blind screen reader user with a sighted friend, and the list goes on. So it's a pretty cool success criterion. Sight Improve checks for it. Axe also checks for it, but it's disabled by default. It's an experimental rule for some reason. I think you might be able to opt in if you pay. TPGI checks for it, and so does IBM. So it's a cross-vendor thing and a very real success criterion, even if Axe and therefore Lighthouse doesn't check it. So the label and name success criterion basically says that every word in the visible label, example 1 is watch the demo. So the visible label is watch the demo. The accessible name is watch demo, opens in a new tab, right? So that's a legitimate thing that you want to do. People want to add an ARIA label because they want to add those words opens in a new tab for the benefit of a screen reader user. No argument there, but the automated checkers are very picky. They're picky about what you need to include because in this example, the word the is missing. The word the is in the visible label. The word the is not in the accessible name, right? It's watch the demo versus just watch demo. So this has no negative user impact that I could find. You know, it doesn't impact voice access AT or any sighted screen reader user scenario. So a manual auditor would probably have to admit that there is no problem here, really. The automated checker isn't that smart. It's just going to fail it because it does an exact character by character comparison. So this is going to get you some noise. So the guidance here is for label and name, you want to take the whole string, the visible label, which is watch the demo, and paste that at the start of your ARIA label. If you do that, you will pass it every time. That guides. Yeah, for sure. So the question was, even if there's extra stuff afterwards, extra stuff is fine, but going one way. Extra stuff in the ARIA label is fine. Extra stuff in the visible label is not fine. It doesn't help that they use the word ARIA label to determine the accessible name. And I'm also using the word visible label that does nothing to do with the ARIA label. So yeah, that takes some getting used to. But if it was the reverse, if the visible label was watch demo opens in a new tab and the accessible name was watch the demo, it would fail. That's just the way the SC works. It's one way. I think I should wrap up pretty soon. Yeah, I'll burn through some of these examples. The point is you need to copy it character for character. This one, the visible label has a hyphen, the ARIA label does not, so the automated checker is going to fail it, even though there's no real accessibility problem. This one, the visible label is books and more, where more has an ampersand. The ARIA label has the word and spelled out, A-N-D. Automated checker is going to fail it, sorry. Similarly with example number 4, Alpine Road. Visible label says Alpine RD, abbreviated. Accessible name from the ARIA label says Alpine Road, R-O-A-D. I'm going to fail it. Example number 5 is a little more interesting. The visible label is new 3. And the number 3 is in a badge. You know, like when you have new text messages, you'll see this little superscript with a red circle around it. Like that's the number. The number of new things is 3. This is straight from a customer. They actually wanted to do this, and they have new 3 as the visible label, and then the ARIA label is just new. For some reason, they decided they didn't want the 3 in there. Maybe that's okay, but the automated checker definitely thinks it's not okay. It's not that smart to realize that the human is going to think that new is the label of this thing, not new 3. So character for character. Or if you can ever do it, just don't use the ARIA label, as per Jeremy's point. Similarly, spelling. This one has canceled spelled with 1 L in the visible label. With 2 L's in the ARIA label, you're going to fail. This one, the last 2 examples actually are a whole other topic that I shouldn't get into, but people do it all the time because the visible text is SUVs, you know, as in the vehicle, SUVs, and the ARIA label is S space U space V's, V-E-E-Z. They did this in a well-intentioned effort to fix the screen reader pronunciation. Because if you do this, like if I test it with NVDA, depending on settings, it'll say something, it won't say SUVs. If the ARIA label wasn't here, it would say SUVs or something like that. It would just get it wrong. So people try to fix that, and they mean well, but they cause other problems, including bad automated checker friendliness. There's a really good article by Adrian Roselli titled, I think, Don't Try to Fix Screen Reader Pronunciation. And he gives arguments on why this is something you shouldn't try to do this. And the problem for screen readers is actually much less than you might think. He said it better than I could, so I would check out his blog if you're interested. Recommendation here is just don't do it. Just delete that ARIA label. Don't try to fix screen reader pronunciation. And we see this also very often with phone numbers. Here, example 8, the phone number is 512-555-1234, and it's all just, you know, just dashes and no space. People put the ARIA label as having spaces, right? 5 space, 1 space, 2 space. And they do that because some screen readers, some of the time, will announce the phone number 512-555 as 512, 555, 1234, right? So they try to fix that, and it fails all the automated checkers for label name. It's too bad. That is our talk, and this is our conclusion slide. I have a couple things to wrap up. Do you? Okay, well, I hope it helps. I hope you have pushback points if you're ever getting bad results from your automated checker. Most of our advice is basically to stop doing a thing, I noticed, rather than start. Just if you're doing something fancy, you're probably going to have a bad time in terms of your automated checker results. So I hope you have the ammunition that you require. That's it. Get in touch. All the details are on the slide. Thank you.